All right, so for tonight's performance talk, we want to focus on the subject of plyometric training. In the strength and conditioning realm, plyometrics have really been a staple in college weight rooms, professional programs, et cetera, and as well as even general fitness. And so with the popularity of plyometrics being in these strength programs and workout programs, we want to touch base on how to maximize your plyometric training. I still believe that even with any kind of modality that's mixed in with your training, coaches still need to be very keen and have an eye on what their athletes' abilities are and how to even find an entryway in introducing even plyometrics to an athlete that might not be familiar. So what's your first thoughts on just plyometrics in general?
So the first things, I think everybody absolutely should be doing some sort of plyometric, and I think you should do them as long as you possibly can for as much intensity as you can across the way. If we speak quickly to like the athlete specific side, all of the necessity speaks for itself. Plyometric action is sport action. For weightlifting, it's the accommodating piece to the strength feature that is the clean and jerk and the snatch. So we should mostly be familiar with our force velocity curve. As force goes up, velocity goes down. So you really just kind of transpose that onto an athlete archetype. And I look at it as, how muscular bound or strength bound are they versus how power, speed, elastic bound are they? And you just emphasize in training whichever one is more efficient. So the broad practices, you have vertical and horizontal applications, and then you have the way we classify them is extensive or intensive intensities or parameters. So the extensive being the lower intensity, more rhythmic skips, hops, light bounds type of modality or movements. And then the intensive being the higher intensity applications. So you're thinking more vertical jumps, counter movement, box, depth, rebound, reactive jumps. And then obviously we can do all these different modalities or different movements, with double leg, single leg, continuous or stop, like having static pauses in between jumps or iterations, or continuous. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of dress them up or, specify them for certain needs. But broadly speaking, absolutely something to the part.
Okay. And I guess like with all those kind of intensities, derivatives, all that kind of stuff, how would you guys both find, I guess, an entryway of introducing those to both your populations?
So for myself with Olympic weightlifting, the more extensive stuff in warm up, and we kind of look at it as introducing the movements with some type of cadence and some type of pattern that the athlete can follow and then repeat over and over again. And the big emphasis there is quick ground contact time.
Yeah, following a chronological programming sequence. Yep. You want to do the movements that demand the highest of your central nervous system first while it's fresh. And then everything should then follow after. So speed work, agility work, plyometrics, those are things that should be done first and foremost. Now, there is a slight caveat to that, especially with the population that I primarily work with, where I actually do like to do some plyometric work under fatigue as well. I think that when the body's exhausted, it should be able to accommodate that same type of force application. However, that's for somebody who has, a robust training history of general base plyometrics as it is.
Yeah, I would say too, with some of my more advanced weightlifters, I will, and depending on where they are programming wise, and some more strength applications and some power applications, aside from the lifts themselves, I like throwing them into some supersets. So doing some heavy hex bar deadlifts, and then immediately stepping out of the hex bar and doing, some squat jumps and everything to kind of give them something to work towards and kind of develop to then go back into another strictly weightlifting program.
Contract is way up there for me. I know you're the same way. That's, I guess, if you really want to trace the origin from it, you can take it all the way back to like, ancient Russian Soviet training. But I would say more recently popularized by like Westside and Cal too as well. But to the point though, it creates that potentiation effect, right? Where we're creating basically an overload or an overtaxing of the central nervous system, and really at the root, the biochemistry of the muscular action, and then following it subsequently something that's unloaded or extremely lightly loaded, so that you have like an overkill effect.
Right. I mean, and to that point too, it's even in kind of like the rehab setting, sometimes that might not even be super accentuated within the rehab process or return to play. Sometimes, aside from like the setting I'm in now, like in the past, I'll see rehabs with like, all right, let's, for instance, a shoulder, let's do your IYTs, let's do some functional, whatever that means kind of stuff. But then sometimes that whole program to return to play completely lacked like a plyometric, kind of thing. Because even with the shoulder, it's like you have upper body plyos and it's like
we have the shit out of this stuff, man. Like, so here's a great example of that. What I've started using for that kind of work, for the cuff, is the concept skier, right? So I'll just set that thing at like a low grade resistance and have somebody, I'll just cue it as throw a football and have them do sets of like 30,
Yeah.
And it's that kind of action. So we get so bent out of shape about the semantics. You can't have an upper body plyometric. Well, you can, because it's just a reflexive action, right?
Exactly. And
take a step further. One of my other favorite ones for the upper body is a band unloaded overspeed push-up, right?
Yep.
So taking like a black band and putting it around the waist and doing fast push-ups, dynamic action push-ups where you come off the ground, because what that's doing fundamentally or physiologically is it's reducing the amount of amortization phase, or the transitional period between counter movement or eccentric loading and then concentric action or projection. So damn, right. Our words up tonight. Nevertheless, when we speed up this amortization phase, it, in a sense, teaches the body to move at a faster rate than it's naturally capable of, right? Doing band unloaded push-ups, you're effectively doing push-ups if you were 30 pounds lighter, right?
Exactly. And I was going to say that. It's like, I'm a huge fan of those, especially for upper body. Because again, if, my fucking 190 pound ass, right when I hit the floor, I can do just 120, you know what I mean? And then again, training that amortization in the upper body, I feel like it's not a lost art, but it's not being, I guess, utilized enough sometimes in what I'm seeing. And then again, from a rehab perspective, you're building like your bone densities, and all that stuff. And then like, muscularly, everything else in like the shoulder girdle, et cetera, et cetera. So
we can get really deep in the weeds on this, but you also get into like autonomic inhibition, and you get into like, again, the reflexive nature of both muscular and fascial, and we'll get to that in a second, but the ability to desensitize or relax the speed or the rate at which the muscle or the tissue can relax, is ultimately a key governor in our ability to produce force or express it, right? So,
right. And even, again, going back to the rehab stuff, for example, you would have, an athlete doing all this kind of shit in a workout, and then all of a sudden, like a tear out of nowhere, or like some kind of like micro tear or anything. And then you kind of look back on the training or the rehab, and it's like they've done so much, like if we go back to the shoulder, like this cuff strengthening work, that they completely negated like the tendinous junction work, for the muscle to accept such a high like load and then violently redirect it somewhere. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's like Achilles or hamstrings, same exact kind of thing.
Well, almost all injuries occur at the tendinous junction.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what is an injury? Like what is it? It's when the tissue is loaded faster than it is capable to respond. Right? So again, almost every case, it's not the amount of force or the amount of weight that causes the injury. It's the rate at which that load or force or whatever was experienced in, right? So like there has to be a velocity component to it, which begs the demand, like you have to have, reflexive, high velocity, ballistic type of training in your late phase rehab and in your strength training regularly, because this is ultimately what occurs during sport and life duty, actually.
Right. Which brings me to the talking point of, this is completely pertinent to anyone who's not like a traditional or sport athlete. Like, so
speed is going to be the ultimate governor. Injuries occur when you move faster than your body can handle. Go look at any even jacked 40-year-old dude that can still squat heavy, 400-pound squat. He looks good. Ask him to go run a sprint.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really what it boils down to, is you have to expose your body to what's going to be demanded of it.
Right. And I guess with all this plyometric talk, what are you guys' thoughts on like the volume throughout the week? What's your guys' philosophy on, programming, all that kind of stuff? For me, it's touch and go. I just have to see what you're capable of.
There's a lot of auto-regulatory nature to it, and especially when you're working with general population, because you just don't know how they're going to respond. If you have a group full of athletes or high performers, it's pretty easy to lay it out as 100 to 120 ground contacts, and then you can start getting into the RSIs and the rates of contacts and stuff like that. But I think for the general person or the general audience, you want to think 1 to 2 sessions a week every 3 months, right? For like 4 weeks at a time. Run a 4-week cycle with 1 to 2 sessions a week. every third month. So like it doesn't need to be an everyday thing.
Exactly. Or like put it on a speed day or something, workout.
Would you even suggest like 1 to 2 times a week, like alternating upper body and lower body plyometrics, or would you kind of do 4 weeks of lower body and then 4 weeks of upper body?
No, I wouldn't program it as upper and lower body. I would program it as either intensive or extensive, which extensive being first. You want to get, with extensive, we're thinking about like cadence and fluency and sequencing and ability to, almost like have this rhythmic nature to your movement. With the propulsive type of plyometrics, kind of those intermediates, I just think about a bouncy ball, right? You're not going super high. It's not a super high impact on the ground. It's just a very nice type of movement. And then the third phase being the ballistic or explosive, where now we're just basically going, balls deep on, bounding, sprinting. What is the best plyometric movement you can do? And then getting more into, when we come back around the next time, some of the single leg movements or the combination movements, doing hurdles into a box jump, or again, coordinating movements and being able to change vectors. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I mean, with on all that you just said, there are hundreds of derivatives you can find entryways in.
Be creative, man. Like literally just go bounce around, hop around, jump on shit, jump down from shit, move left, move right. Like just move around and just do it with intent and do it with the outcome that you're seeking, and that being a reflexive movement.
Right. And with all that being said, moving around, trying different shit out, intensities, load, vectors, how do you tie all that into like the fascial stuff?
So they go hand in hand, right? I mean, that description right there applies equally in both ends. But, the first thing that comes to mind with the fascial system is the kinesthesia and the proprioceptive awareness. Like, and I think, again, especially for the athletes that I work with, that's probably benefactor number one. Like, you're not going to put 4 inches on your vertical. We're not going to add, 8 inches on your broad jump. But what you will notice is things like gait cleaning up, the way that they go and just kind of move and do general things, put things up on the rack, pull them down, right? Like everything just starts to kind of integrate a little bit better. And I think that that's in part due to the fluid that's being pushed to these different areas and in different ways. And then also just the messaging or the signaling that, we now know is embedded within the fascial network. So when you expose your body to this new shit or these different types of movements, or, whether you're somebody who's coming off of injury and it's been 16 weeks since you've moved under speed, it's like a shotgun effect for your central nervous system and for the program. So speaking again fascially, this is what I just think of as like recharging that messenger system.
Okay. I mean, and it's all inclusive. I mean, it's just another modality to train in the whole entire repertoire, no matter who you are. So
and I would, not to cut you off, but you got me on the roll now. Like, I would also say that probably the most overlooked aspect of plyometrics is moving horizontally and moving, again, in multiplanar, of course. But, again, it's one of those things where like we hear the word plyometric and we immediately associate it to a vertical jump or a broad or a box jump. Right.
Exactly.
I get a lot more benefit, or I think I get a lot more return with most of my athletes from moving horizontally.
Yeah. And that's just different planes of motion. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So, I think that's all good. Anything else you want to add in?
That was great.
Yeah.
So do your plyos.